Welcome to Murder Most Foul, a podcast devoted to exploring famous murder cases of our time. Some solved, some unsolved, but all fascinating and guaranteed to raise the hairs on the back of your neck. I'm your host, Jim Solanowski. Today's episode: Red Flag Warning. If your husband joked on a nationally televised game show that the biggest mistake he made at his wedding was saying "I do," would you consider that a red flag? Becky Bliefnick did. She tried to tell her family, her friends, even the police, that she was getting increasingly frightened of her husband, Tim. 2 weeks before her divorce trial was to begin, Tim shot her 14 times in her bathroom. The coroner testified that Becky did not die swiftly, but was conscious as she bled out, staring up at her husband as he stood over her. My guest today is Sonova Cantrell, an award-winning true crime writer, licensed private investigator, and victims advocate, with nearly a decade of experience raising awareness for cold cases. She has written about more than 500 cases and authored 15 published books, including one endorsed by an FBI agent. Welcome, Sonova.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So, as I told you before we went on air, that what I usually do is find an interesting case, and then I find an author or a detective or a social worker or a lawyer, someone that can talk about the case, rather than me just reading from Wikipedia, which some people do. So I found you a very interesting bio that you have on. We'll get your websites and all that stuff out there so people can continue to follow you and look at more wonderful stuff you've done. But just the sort of the first paragraph that you have, you're a crime writer, a speaker, a victims advocate, which we'll talk about, true crime writer license. We'll talk. You're a private investigator now. Got the magnifying glass and the whole thing, and you've written more than 500 cases. So there, I just about did everything. But why don't you fill us in a little bit of how you came to do this kind of investigative work?
I started out as a writer and a blogger, and I had written a book about a biography of an ex-gangster from Chicago. And I quickly learned that it takes longer to write a book than it does to lose the attention span of an audience. So I started writing a blog to keep the audience warm while I was writing another book. And then I was struggling for the first year or so trying to figure out what topics to write about. And then I came across victims advocacy by accident, because in reality, I was seeing all of these massive JonBenet Ramsey type cases, but nearby there were hundreds of cases that the mothers couldn't even get on their local news. And these cases weren't solved mainly because the police couldn't get any leads. Nobody was talking about these cases. And my heart went out to those people. And I thought, well, maybe it's just because I'm in a rural area. But then I found it's a nationwide problem that if you don't have a lot of money, if you don't have a certain political leaning, if you don't have certain connections, your case just does not get the coverage it needs. And so I tried to fill in the gap. So I spent 10 years building basically an online marketing machine, and I will find cases that need help and I will plug them into that machine. And at this point, my stuff goes out to a potential of 2.2 million potential viewers throughout different networks. And that is what my main goal was. And then I had gone over about 500 of these cases, and you start to notice patterns. And I've studied criminal psychology and forensics and all kinds of stuff because I'm kind of a nerd. And so I've studied all these things, and I was like, how can I take it a step further? And so that's when I started studying to be a PI. And last December, I actually got those licensing and credentials done. So I am officially a PI now. So, yay.
And you do have, excuse me, you have appeared in documentaries. It's a love-hate relationship with true crime. And I'm not going into here. It's on my
Yeah.
website how I got involved.
Yeah.
And it's not amazing. But you got, when I remember 2020, when I was young, was news.
Mm-hmm.
Was Hugh Downs, and they did news stories like 60 Minutes. Now, true crime, 48 Hours,
Mm-hmm.
Oxygen Network, Port TV, the whole, everyone loves true crime, and that's good for us.
Yeah.
But it's a crowded field, and so you find your niche in there where you can. And I'm trying to do it with cases, not so much razzle dazzle, but an interesting. Right. So we do want to talk about that case. I found this one interesting for two reasons. Aside from the brutality of it and the family destruction that this guy, because again, more times than not, it involves children. Right. They were the couple had children, and now their father's in jail and the mother's dead. There's no parents. But also, I covered an earlier case, the Ron Altala case, which people should go back and watch listen to my podcast on that. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but he was on Dating Game. Mm-hmm. He was a contestant that came out of the blue and was a contestant on Dating Game. And the theory, they didn't prove it, but that he had the body of a woman in the trunk when he showed up for the taping because he didn't have time to get rid of her. Whether true or not, he killed several women. And he did not, thankfully, he won the date of the three, but they go backstage afterwards and get acquainted. And she went, "No, he's too weird." So she did not go on the date. And he subsequently, of course, was caught and convicted. This case, and the name is my name's Solanowski, so I shouldn't complain about names. But the case that we're talking about, and I don't think it has a fancy name. Maybe it does. You can tell me if it does. And they probably just throw it again. Game show hosts will talk about the connection there. But it's Becky Bliefnick.
Bliefnick, I believe.
Bliefnick. Yeah. We're not, and her husband, Tim. And so we'll go Becky and Tim, which is easier to talk about it. And so briefly, we'll talk about their background and how this case came to be. And there's some interesting twists and turns. And one of the things that I also found interesting of this, people be careful, internet searches. Yeah. If you're going to be a criminal, if you want to rob, then fraud, then that's okay, embezzle. But if you're going to kill someone, don't look up how to either do it or get rid of the body. Guess what? They're going to get your phone. They're going to get your computer. This had a big part in that case. That the evidence obviously was very circumstantial. But boy, this kind of stuff really, for me, if I was a juror, really sealed it. And his attorney has appeared on the various TV shows and tried to dismiss it. I mean, you really can't, but we'll get to that. So tell us a little bit about Tim and his appearance on, which I like the show. I mean, I like the host on Family Feud. So this was 2 years before anything sort of went south with this couple. And maybe you know the answer to this. I found the video online, and they're focusing on him because the host, Steve Harvey. And he is trying to get a joke out of the guy as he's introducing them all. Was his wife on the show with him?
He did not invite his wife, and his wife was offended by it.
Okay, we got that. So again, the shot shows a woman next to him. And usually if they're couples, there's man, woman, then maybe a father or an uncle or a cousin to get five. I think they have five per side. But so if there is, even if it's a girlfriend, they usually have, man, woman when they can get it. So I saw a woman's shoulder next to him and I thought, wow, I wonder if that's Becky. So tell us about his introduction on the Family Feud.
Well, I study criminal psychology and behavioral psychology. I actually got some certifications in those things as a victim's advocate because I wanted to help with trauma coaching. And so I look at things a little differently, and you need to understand how the subconscious mind works. He's in an exciting place. He's talking on TV, which is exciting. He's talking to a very famous host, Steve Harvey. Steve Harvey is very quick-witted. Whether you like him or not, he's very quick-witted. He can get a response usually before they're finished talking. And this is one time that I seen him kind of get stumped for a few seconds before he could respond.
Attention to this contestant, 40-year-old Tim Bliefnick. His response to Steve Harvey's question quickly became the most unsettling in the show's history.
200 married people, what's the biggest mistake you made at your wedding?
Said I do.
But you need to understand that his response was a true response. That is actually how he felt. And then you'll see him kind of back off of it and try to clean up his mess a little bit. But you'll understand when you start studying psychology, what comes out in that moment of intense excitement and maybe nervousness, that's usually more of the truth than what comes later. But he gets on this show, and Steve Harvey basically, I can't quote it word for word, basically ask him, what was the biggest mistake you've ever made? And he says, I do. Saying I do. And then he gets this real creepy look on his face. And that creepy look is what everyone's made memes out of. But then he goes back and kind of backs it off. I love you, honey, but and tries to make a joke out of it. And Steve Harvey kind of hits him, and he waits for a second, and he's like, you're in me trouble when you get home, kind of thing. But the idea is, when you understand the mind of a criminal, you'll understand that this is actually his truth. That is actually what he felt. And so later on, he'll try to dismiss all those things. But no, he didn't invite his wife. His wife was working long hours and things, and he didn't even invite her to go on the show with him. And she was offended by it. And he would try to make off different stories of why he didn't, and try to make himself sound like he's the hero because she was working too much and he didn't want to add too much to her, which you'll find is perfect psychopathic and narcissistic behavior. Everything has to be about him, and there's always a good reason why he's being a jerk. And but that's basically what happens. And I noticed you said 2 years before everything went south. That's before the public noticed he went south, because everything was south already. But it was just behind the scenes, and he was doing a good job of hiding it from everybody. But you'll find out that they were having problems a long time before that.
Now, again, like in most of these cases, it was fairy tale in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the pictures, she was beautiful. He was handsome. Again, the kids' faces are always blocked out, so I don't know what they look like. But the family, it was just, and I'm sorry, we should point out where this happened. Where?
This is in Illinois.
In Illinois.
Yeah.
So he, again, they have kids one after another. I mean, they're close enough in age.
Mm-hmm.
They have 3 kids.
Yep.
He was in another kind of business and making money and was able to handle everything. And then she wanted to go back to school. And the first danger that comes out, of course, he's been interviewed. So I'm going back and forth from these interviews. And, oh, no, I supported her. No, I was happy to pick up extra, home time help for her so that she could do this. I just thought it would be too much emotionally, mentally. She wanted to be a nurse. So he thought, no. But then the flip side, of course, is that, and everyone, when it comes to the trial, he never hit her, he never beat her, he never pushed her downstairs. And my experience and my knowledge from these kind of cases, it's more insidious when it's control, and when it's subtle and not overt, because of 2 reasons. It's more, there's no scars, there's nothing to show the police, and the family doesn't see it.
Right.
Family doesn't come over and see the glasses broken and the mirror off the wall. They don't see any of that. Mm-hmm. So it's her word saying, well, he watches maybe not in this case, but in most of these, he watches my money. I get this small allowance. I can't go here. I can't go to this friend's house. I can't do that. Mm-hmm. And slowly it becomes, and it depends on how much the wife or girlfriend pushes back. So she eventually pushed back, and we're on the road to a divorce. I mean, you can fill in anything there, but the basics are it starts out well, and they met and courted and everything. Usually in courting that doesn't come out. You probably tell me more about that from a psychological standpoint, but mostly it doesn't. Or otherwise, it'd be like, hey, buddy, nice to have a drink with you. I'm gone. You want my key?
It's love bombing at the beginning.
No, I'm gone. But
Yeah.
this slowly, whatever. And so now she's at a place where I've got 3 kids, but I don't know if I can live like this. Now, am I oversimplifying, or is that sort of where their life is at this point?
I think that's a good outline for 90% of these cases, honestly. There's love bombing at the beginning. And I wanted to go back and correct something. He has lost his appeals, and he's lost his bid to the Supreme Court. Didn't know if you knew that. I was looking up. I will send you a link. I ended up going ahead and watching. He had to go on and do his narcissistic thing of, well, it's time to tell my side. So it's, let's see, it's Muddy River News. And I'll send you a link to this. But he spent the whole hour and 17 minutes telling a completely fabricated story of what his view of their life was. And they met on the internet, and everything was great. And they had a pre-planned financial plan before they ever got married. And I'm thinking, that's great and good. But when you find out that his version of planned financial plan wasn't exactly what she had said, then you start to question things. But he said they had a pre-planned financial plan before they ever got married. He had moved her around this way, that way, and then they ended up where they were, and they ended up having kids right away, which he was surprised. He didn't think they would have kids for a while. At the time, she was a pharmaceutical scientist, so she was making lots of money. And then they had one child, and then the second pregnancy, she actually lost. And in this whole video, you're going to find out that he blames everything completely on her anger issues that she has maintained for years because of that miscarriage. And that's what he anchors the whole sob story, poor pitiful me, onto is, well, now she has anger issues and she would just explode over anything, and she was mistreating the kids, and on. And 117 minutes of this, basically just saying, he did come out and say, I didn't do this. But then the rest of the time it was all, poor pitiful me. She was so mean to me. She was so mean to our kids, and she was the aggressor. But you'll find out in that interview, he does say that he's lost his final appeal and that the Supreme Court has denied him as well. And of course, he plays the victim card in that and says he didn't get a good defense. And so the defense attorneys chose not to mount a defense because he says that constitutes the right for him to get a new trial. And they chose not to mount a defense because they believed that the other team didn't have a good enough case. And so out of their arrogance, they didn't mount a defense, and he lost. But all of his defense, the things he wants to defend, are little minute things that aren't actually the big points in the case. So he defends, his internet searches. He defends different things. And he always has a perfectly planned excuse for everything that he does. And that always raises a red flag. Man, woman, whatever. If you get into any kind of relationship with someone and they never take responsibility for something and they always have a good sounding excuse, that's always a red flag. You want to maybe hesitate before you jump in. Just from a victim's advocate standpoint, that's usually a major red flag that you can still see through the love bombing, because you don't see all the evil tendencies at the beginning, but you can still see that habit of never accepting responsibility through the love bombing. And it's usually there when you look back. And so that's usually my advice to people, women or men, that are starting to try to get into a relationship with someone they don't really know, that they've met on the internet.
So we are on the eve of a divorce. Again, a little fast forward. There's things here that people can check out online and check you did a YouTube on it, and so some of the details are important, but they're not for the story moving forward. That there were some attempts and successes with restraining orders. This again is normal with a divorce. He's stalking me. He comes, they each have their own. I don't know where he was staying. Was she staying in the marital house and he had an apartment, or how were they during the end? Where were they?
He actually lived within 2 miles of her. It was like 3 blocks away. And there were cameras on all the neighbors' houses, so you could literally drive from one house to the next and be filmed almost the entire way. When you're looking for red flags, sometimes what's said isn't important. It's the way it's said and that little gut-wrenching feeling you get for a second. In this interview that I just watched, he said they had a financial plan. But then all of a sudden, she decides she needs to be a stay-at-home mom. And the way he said it, it was detrimental to all stay-at-home moms, like they are somehow less than. And it was more important to him that they maintain this financial agreement that they had talked about while they were dating. And you can see right there that was the point of contention for him. He didn't want to have to take more financial responsibility. He didn't want her to be a stay-at-home mom. And then he never once mentions that she gives up one job to study and then gets another job. He doesn't ever say on this 117 minutes worth of video that she stayed home long enough to take care of her little kids and to go to school, and then she got a job. He made it sound like she was a deadbeat mom that just wanted to stay home in her pajamas and do nothing and let the kids run wild, And so that is another one of those things where you can hear what they say, you can understand what their point is, but you can feel a little bit of something different in that undertone, and that's where I believe his problems started with their relationship, because he was actually the one that filed for divorce, and he felt justified in doing it because she had changed the plan, and then he starts bringing forth all of these anger issues from years and years before when she had a miscarriage. And anyone that suffered a miscarriage, yes, you can have anger issues for years. That's not, not saying, but that was his whole point. She changed the plan. Now I have to make more money, and she's getting to stay home and I don't. And that is very childish behavior. And it's one of those things that when you start seeing some of those things, that's where you need to start paying more attention, because that shows you his truth. You always want to look for their truth, and you can see it if you pay attention. 2 weeks out from their trial, on February 23rd, Becky is gunned down in her own home. Her bedroom window is opened about 1:11 a.m. and she hears it. She tries to run towards her bathroom. She tries to grab the phone and call and run towards her bathroom, which adjoins her bedroom. She does not make it in time. The call does not go through, and she is shot 14 times. She falls back on her back, staring up at her killer as he shoots her 14 times. What's drastically even more terrible is the fact that the coroner said that none of the 14 gunshot wounds would have killed her. They would paralyze her. She would be in excruciating pain, and then she literally laid there until she bled to death. So she laid there for a long time. And so if that just adds another layer of horribleness to this, she had to look at the man as he shot her, and then she just had to lay there till she was gone. And that is worse than some of the other cases I've seen. I've seen all kinds of cases, but that makes it just a little more dreadful. And then the fact that he is going to end up making up a story, picking up the kids when he's not supposed to, not scheduled to, and then sending her own father to check on her because he hadn't heard from her. So her own father is going to find her in that position several hours after she's deceased.
The boys were not home, and of course he knew that. That's why he picked
He
that.
had them.
If you believe everything, and which I do, I've followed all the trial, that he knew, he picked his day, knew they weren't going to be there. In fact, they were with
At his
him.
house. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so he left them.
Mhm.
Was there someone else? They were just there. I mean, one of them was
He left the three boys at his house asleep at 1:00 in the morning.
Right.
You'll see all of his devices shut off. You'll see this lone bicyclist come from down the road where he lived and turn to go down to Becky's house. You'll lose the bicyclist just before 1:11 a.m. Then she is shot and killed in her home. You'll see the bicyclist come back a few moments later. You'll see after he gets back home, you'll see all of his devices fire back up. So he says that it wasn't him on that bicycle, that was a prowler, but that happened on 3 different occasions while he was scoping out the scene, trying to see if she was dating someone that had spent the evening with her one night, and he was wanting to make sure that this wasn't an every night occurrence, so he'd know what he had to come up against. So he wasn't man enough to target 2 people that were there. So if there was a man spending the night, he was going to have to change his plan. So he waited till she was home alone. And he knew where the kids were because he had them. And then he killed her and went back home and fired up all of his stuff. And so he tried to say that, well, my stuff goes offline periodically. You can't make a big case out of that. But when you can plot it out minute by minute, how long it would take you to ride a bike from one place to the other, how far it is, the guy turns the exact space that he's supposed to turn to go to his house versus Becky's house. And you see it happen 3 different times. And each time Tim's devices go dark, that is pretty suspicious. And then when you find out one of his internet searches was, does my fitness tracker track my every movement? And once it said yes, that's when you start seeing his devices go dark periodically. So he shot himself in the foot.
You're giving so much information that I didn't have, which is great.
Oh,
That's why
sorry.
I'm going like, no, wait a minute. Now, I don't have a great criminal mind. I should after what I've been doing. But why didn't he just leave all the stuff at home on? Which would show he was there he doesn't need his phone to go kill his wife. What's he going to call 911?
Exactly.
That makes like you said, it's more suspicious to have the stuff off.
Right.
Now, if you need again, we've had these people that travel long distances out in the desert to kill someone. They don't want to be without communication, but he's going 2 blocks or whatever it was at the time. Yeah. And why would he take okay, well, so I'm sure they maybe came up. Someone used that in an argument, but it may just as you put it forward, it makes absolutely no sense. But now let's talk about the gun for a minute too.
The missing one or the one that was used on her?
Right, and this was a gun that she either purchased. It was in her name, and gave it to him for. It's not important why it sort of became his gun. And before the trial and the murder.
Yes.
She wanted it back, and she never got it back. Is that correct?
Right. So we're talking possibly 2 different firearms, but we don't know. One is the one that she was killed with, and one is the one that he was ordered to give back to her in the divorce. Now, there was a gun that was hers that she had purchased, and we're not sure if he took it with him out of sight because of during the divorce when he moved out, or if she had actually give it to him. He was a avid firearms enthusiast, and he, up until 2019, 2020, which he blamed on her, he would go shooting at different shooting ranges, and he was upset that since she worked nights and weekends as a nurse, he couldn't go do what he wanted to do anymore. So he made a big deal about that in this latest interview that he did. Poor pitiful him. And that's sarcasm. I hope no one actually thinks I'm from the South. I have massive amounts of Southern sarcasm. I try to keep it together, but the idea of it is that gun was a point of contention. She asked the judge to give it back to her. She had taken all kinds of precautions. She had saved all the screenshots. She was collecting her own evidence, and she was telling people around her, her friends, her family, the police, the judge. She was scared of him. She was afraid he was going to use it on her. She said, this man, you do not understand. He will stop at nothing to get what he wants. And he wants the kids. He wants the house. He wants everything from me. And he will kill me if I get in the way. And there's text messages. There's all kinds of documentation to the court system where she was begging for help and she never got it. But in that point, in that process, in the middle of the divorce, which, they weren't quite finished with, the judge does order that he give her that gun back. And he never has it. Well, I haven't found it. I don't know. I never were. Well, that hurt him in court. So this whole concept of 2 years after he's convicted, he's going to do this big interview to give his side of the story. He has come up in 2 years. He's come up with a story that's a good, sufficient sob story to explain where that gun is. And my thought on it is, if you knew where the gun was, why didn't that come up in court? He didn't come up with it in court because he hadn't figured it out yet. He hadn't written that narrative in his mind yet, so he couldn't give it in court. So it's pretty obvious. But he says that gun he couldn't give back because on one day where they were just fighting so hard and he felt so broken and so distraught and he didn't think he was ever going to get to have his kids and he just couldn't understand this woman that he loved. I'm whatever. I can't even continue that line of BS. He was so heartbroken. He said he took some wedding photos, some notes that she had written him when they were dating, that gun, and his wedding ring. He drove down to the river. He dismantled the gun and threw it all in the river in an act of, oh, poor pitiful me. And I'm sitting here going, I've heard of girls getting upset after a breakup and burning pictures of their boyfriends and stuff, but I'm sitting here going, I have never heard of a man doing that. And then it just so happens that it's the gun as well. The wedding pictures, the wedding ring, you might get upset and you might throw those away, but why a gun? He just has to add that gun in because that will give a story to cover the fact that he doesn't want to give up that gun. And so that was one of the big points of contention in his trial. And because he couldn't manufacture that, he couldn't manufacture a story of what happened to that gun. Well, now he's had 2 years in the prison and he thought of a good way to make it a sob story. And the idea is you can tell it's BS when there has to be a drama with it. If it was, I was mad, I dismantled it, I threw it in the freaking river. Okay, that's actually more believable than, I was having a bad day and I had to take my wedding ring and So when you add the drama, it's BS. Because the truth is, a man gets angry and mad and dismantles something and throws it away. That's logical. That's a testosterone fueled fit. So that can make sense. But when they start adding in all this other backstory to make you feel sorry for them, that's when you know that they're lying through their teeth.
And again, one of the things that I'm going through some of the evidence as it rolls out slowly, each one I go, no, that's nail in his coffin. So I believe they did find obviously some shell casings though some of them were thinking might have been in a bag that's a little complicated, but there were some casings at the murder scene, and they had shell casings from his house or maybe the shooting range somewhere. So it wasn't the full ability to do ballistics, but even when you're just using the casing, the little golden part, you can say, and it was certainly the same caliber that killed her. So those are there, and you put the two together, and it's like, yes, it's the kind of gun that he should have had.
Yeah.
I don't know if both of his guns or the one that she gave to him, supposedly. So that's taking you to that direction. So is there something I'm missing about the guns they never
could prove that the gun that he is missing is the one that she was killed with, but they did prove that a gun that was shot in his home was also shot in her home, and it was at the front in the bathroom. So what they did was there was 50 something cartridges, casings, bullet casings that were found in his home, 50 something, and they narrowed it down to, I believe it's 21 or 28 casings. And those casings were shot by the same gun that killed Rebecca in her bathroom. So they found these casings on the floor. They only found some of them because he had looked up how to silence your weapon. Okay. So he was trying to make a homemade silencer, and he had all these bags that he had kind of tied in underneath things to catch the casings. Okay, because he didn't want to stand there long enough listening to her die to pick up his own shell casings. And I'm sitting here going, anyways, I could say a lot of things, but I'll try not to. This is your show, and I'm trying to be nice. But the idea is he was trying to be smart. And sometimes when you aren't and you try too hard, you make stupid mistakes, and this was one of them. He for one, you don't put anything warm in a plastic bag. That's the reason why the plastic bag had melted shards all over the bathroom floor. So sense, I mean, where's the sense? But anyways, that was the point of that. So they didn't have the gun. And if you don't have the murder weapon, it's really hard to get a murder conviction. And they know that. So what they did was they took the shell casings that were left by her body. They picked those up and they ran forensics on them. And every gun has a specific pattern as it's fired that's going to leave specific markings on the shell casing. And those were matched to 20-something shell casings at his house. So whatever kind of gun it was, whatever his excuse is, he says he threw that gun away a long time ago. Whatever the reasoning is, there was a gun fired in his house and fired in her house, the one that killed her. And those bullets were shot from the same gun. So that was pretty definitive proof. And when he was asked about that, he had no reason. He's like, well, I don't know. And it always goes to the generic, well, maybe the police planted that. And I'm like, yeah, because they have a habit of doing that. I roll. But the idea is they couldn't get the actual weapon, so they tried to get the next best thing. And they proved that same gun was shot to kill her and shot in his house at the same time. So that's as close as they could get because they couldn't come up with the murder weapon.
And again, with the internet searches, there's a couple I want to talk about because I have a question about this one, but the one I'm going to talk about in a minute. But a lot of times, again, I have the cases where the guy, again, like I said, usually the guy is searching for how do I do this? How do I get rid of a body? How much lime do I need to whatever? Yeah. And a lot of them come back with, well, I'm writing a book. Mm-hmm. They just moment, and this all happened, but I'm writing a book. Yeah. But he had more than a couple of questions. Yeah. I mean, the list where they show the text messages in this video I saw, and there are, 10, 15, 25 that again did with the silencer, how, make sure I don't get gunpowder residue on my hand, so on and so forth. Then he had one. Tell me about this one, where he was suspecting that she was seeing someone. Mm-hmm. And so, again, he was pedaling his little bike back and forth and took pictures of a car that was at her house late at night, the license number and the VIN number. You must have opened the door to get the VIN number, whatever. And then is searching online. Well, can you find someone's, if you're not a cop? Am I missing something now? I can go online and check a license plate number now?
Yeah, you can. It's not accurate.
Yes.
Yeah, there's all kinds of websites out there and databases that you can track through that. They're not accurate, and most of them are just scams. That's the reason why he did 200 searches, because you get through all this and you pay $1.99 and then you download this and you go through here and you listen, and it's like, we got 72,000 pages on this guy, and it's a bunch of old addresses, and you're like, so if you're a PI, then you actually have actual official databases and you can contact the DMV and get that information. But basically, he was just trying to find anything and everything to see if she had a boyfriend. And Another place you can look for the VIN on a truck. It was a truck. You can look at down underneath the windshield wipers down below. It's stamped in there.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can actually. So he didn't actually have to open a door. He could actually look down through there and get get the VIN number down there. But the idea is there are a lot of websites that tell you they're going to, that you can snoop around and find it. I am actually an OSINT investigator, which is open source technology. So I can find a ton of information. I walked out of a PI's office with a name. I found him on Facebook. I said, "Is this your guy?" He said, "Yes." I came back within 24 hours and I had just my report was 5.5 pages long. That's what I do. I can find it. So I'm like, well, if you had to give it to me, I could have figured out who that guy was, but somebody like that, that's the reason why he had to do 200 searches. He didn't have access, but he was trying to find it. And he was pretty determined to do 200 searches, trying to figure out who this man was. And so, but yeah, you can find some of that stuff because people put too much information on the internet. Some people, they put, so you go on somebody's Facebook page and they fill out their profile and you could tell everything about them. And I'm a Gen Xer. I'm sitting here going, I don't want to know what you had for breakfast. It's like, I don't care. I had a lot of breakfast meals over my lifetime and I've never once told my friends about it, So it's like, but people put too much on the internet. And so there is sometimes that you can find things like that. But
so now as we add up this stuff, as I said, that they're just, and again, the trial was, long and a lot of other things. It came out and people testified, friends of hers testified how she felt, again, to establish or to, give credence to her fears, and that that even though there was no evidence, I'm sure they brought up was he ever arrested for it? No. Did he ever kick a door down? Well, no. Did he ever threaten her with a knife? No. They maybe interviewed the kids. I don't know if they're old enough to say, did you ever see him slap mommy? So let's say all that comes back really clean. So there was all of that, and as you stated earlier on, and I've seen this before in other cases, where the defense, it's better to say nothing and say, we don't think you've proven your case. They may even go for I forget the word for it, but a directed judgment before, they even go to the jury. It's like, okay, this case has not been proven. And of course, the judge goes, you're crazy, and they move on. But so they didn't put a case on. They certainly didn't put him on. How long was the actual trial? In weeks and days? Long, short?
I can't remember how long it was. I know I watched 10 days of the trial on because you can watch them as they go live, and I watched 10 days of it. But that's sometimes there's a little before and a little after. So just because I watched a video of it doesn't mean that it was exactly 10 days. I can't remember if it was 12 days or what, because they don't film everything, for those things. But I know it was at least 10 days. Because I watched 10 days worth of trial. But the concept with it is he is so openly, blatantly narcissistic in his behaviors that it would have been stupid on their part to put him on a stand. He wanted to go, but he would have proven his own guilt just in his self-centered narcissism. He wasn't going to be able to get on there and make a scene and say, the mother of my children, he would have to twist it around and make it about him. And it only takes a couple of those moments of twisting a narrative to serve yourself before the jury picks up on it. And so it would not have been smart for them to put him on stage. And I like to go through and watch these videos. And so I watched this one just before we went on to, where he's talking 2 years later. And I like to go see what the comments are. And there were so many comments that said, well, I wasn't 100% sure on his guilt, but I am now. And so That's the reason why they didn't do it. For one, they thought they had a good enough case where they could, it was just he said, she said, because there wasn't any police reports about him abusing her. And then, it was one of those things where there was no weapon. And he says he didn't have any reason because he felt like he had proven his case in the divorce court and that in a week he was going to get everything he asked for. Well, if you look back at the documents and everything, you'll find out that he wasn't going to win that either. And so that most likely was the catalyst for this to happen because he realized he wasn't going to be able to BS his way through this divorce hearing and he was going to lose. And that was I believe, the catalyst that probably pushed him to do this. Because, if he had said anything on stand, it would have just made it worse. Every interview you hear about him, he makes it worse.
What is the situation with the kids? I believe on a video I saw they're with somebody's parents or sisters or brothers, but where are the kids now in custody?
And the last that I heard, they were staying mainly with her sisters. And then I don't know if that there's actually been any kind of legal custody granted as of yet, but from what I understand, it's kind of between her parents and her sister. So they're kind of, co-parenting, trying to kind of make a support system. But according to himself, in this interview, he has not seen the kids since he was arrested.
As far as the case, how long do you remember how long the jury was out?
It didn't seem like they were out very long. I don't have the minute count. It seemed like they were just out a very short time. It seemed
a couple of days, not weeks. Yeah,
it wasn't one of those things where they had a stalemate and the judge had to order them to hurry up and grab more pizza kind of thing. It was they were. I've been on those juries where it's like, get more pizza. It's going to be a while. I believe that was the, I can't remember who it was. It was the lead juror. I forgot what they call him, but he was the one that says the judge asked how it's going. He's like, bring more pizza. It's going to be a while. I'm like, I don't want it to be a while, but anyways, side note, but they gotta love ADHD. But anyways, it didn't seem like it was very long. I can't remember how long it was. It's been a while since I looked at it.
People should. There's a YouTube. Again, I don't know which of the crime shows it was, but they show the sentencing. Luckily, this was all filmed. Wasn't federal court, and the judge gave him life without parole, and counted the shots out loud.
You researched this murder. You planned this murder. You practiced this murder. You broke into her house and you shot her. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 times. I don't know how long it took you to do that. Some of those shots were fired while she was lying on the ground. And you did all of that while your children were upstairs at your house, lying snug in their beds.
So as we do indeed wrap up, and you're mentioning I found you first through Facebook, and then you did have a link from Facebook to your website and your blogs and all that. So why don't you, again, we talked a little bit about it. We can wrap up with a red flag, and that this was a classic domestic violence. Not classic because there wasn't violence there, physical violence, though emotional violence can be worse, as we discussed earlier. That anything you want to wrap up with in your feeling?
Red flags that were missed, you mean? That's kind of what I did my whole video on, was the red flags missed, because as a victim's advocate, you want to put out there, if you're having problems and you fear for your safety, sometimes the best people to talk to aren't your inner circle, because friends and family knew, the police knew, the judge knew. But we get so used to hearing each other's problems that sometimes we get tone deaf, and we kind of think, well, nothing's ever going to happen. We know her spouse. He's a pain in the neck, but he's not violent, or, so we start making excuses because we've heard the story too many times. And so I always, when I made my video, I said, sometimes step out of your network and talk to somebody else. Talk to somebody on the outside. There are counselors you can talk to. There are people that are trained to see these red flags that will help you, and they will not overlook them. That's their whole job. And, I feel bad for her because she tried to. She tried to reach outside her circle. She tried. The police dropped the ball. The police should have went to that man's home when the judge ordered her to get that gun back from him. They should have went to his home and found the place. If he threw it in the river, they should have went over there and verified that there's a piece, there's a part, found something. They didn't give her the protection order that she asked for. So that one's on the judge. There's so many different things that she tried to get help for. And it all comes out in her trial, and all of these things and evidences that she had been collecting actually helped convict the man. But if they had been seen to begin with, if somebody had paid attention to begin with, this wouldn't have happened. And so when it comes to the red flags, emotional violence is a drastic thing. Emotional violence is real. People control people through anxiety and stress. They will love bomb you and then take that love away as a punishment for you maybe thinking for yourself. Any of those behaviors you see, you need to step out of your little network, because was mom trained to be a therapist? Was your best friend that went to high school with you, does she know? She loves you and she cares, but when they're too emotionally attached, they don't see the truth, and emotions will cloud that. And so that was kind of my point of my whole video, was this is a case that's done and over with. And I usually work on cold cases. I do have a couple serial killer cases. You're going to have to check my channel out, because I know you do serial killers.
Yeah.
I have to check those out.
This is on your YouTube channel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's it called? Is it just your name, or?
My channel is, if you look up Sonova Cantrell or Sonova Inc., you will find me everywhere. But Sonova Cantrell on YouTube, I have 300 and something videos on there. But I did a deep dive psychological analysis of the KC Butcher, Bob Berdella, with a officer that is from Kansas City. He was a retired cop. And so we did a whole deep dive analysis on Bob Berdella. And then, of course, the I-70 serial killer. I've got 2 or 3 different serial killer ones just for you, because I know you do those. But
no, because I love return guests. I already know their setup is good.
Yeah. I probably talk too much, but I make a living talking. As a victim's advocate, I have spoken on behalf of mothers. I've gone all the way to the Missouri State Capitol, speaking on behalf of mothers. So I make a living talking. So I talk probably too much.
You have the American flag before you in the case. Is that a personal memento, or?
That was flown over Washington, D.C. in honor of my cold case work. That was given to me by a Texas governor. I ran a series of cases in Texas and helped bring in leads to solve some. And a victim's family member called her congressman and told him what I was doing. And he called the governor, and that flag was flown over Washington, D.C. in honor of my cold case work, folded and sent to me. So that is the whispers of all of the victims' family members kind of pushing me forward. So that represents all of the families that I've tried to work with over the years. That's what that is.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank our guest today, Sonova Cantrell. You can find her all over the place, YouTube, Facebook. And again, if you just even put her name in, all her various little links will come up, so you can see various things that she has done. Contact her like I did if you have either a job for her or you need some help. I'm sure she's going to be there for you. So once again, thank you, Sonova.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So I'd like to thank you folks for kindly tuning in for another episode of Murder Most Foul. If you liked what you heard, I hope you'll tell your friends. Information about the podcast and an email link that can get a message to me can be found at the podcast's website, the address being www.murdermostfoul, all one word, no caps, no spaces, .com. So, until we meet again, stay safe, and for God's sakes, don't murder anyone.